A massive crack just opened in one of the most solid alliances in American history.
Yeah, it really did. And you can actually still feel the tremors in Washington right now.
Right, so let's set up the news hook here because the timeline is super critical. On April 15th, 2026, the U.S. Senate held this historic vote. Senator Bernie Sanders led a huge push to block over $400 million in weapons sales to Israel.
And, spoiler alert, the effort failed. The weapons are still shipping out.
Exactly. But the actual numbers on that vote sent absolute shockwaves everywhere. 40 Democratic senators, which is like over 80% of their entire voting caucus, voted to stop the sale of military bulldozers.
Which is just a staggering statistic when you look at the history of American foreign policy. For decades, military aid to Israel was the one thing you could count on passing with almost unanimous bipartisan support.
So today, for this deep dive, we are opening up a huge stack of sources. We've got a Congressional Research Service report, official Senate roll call votes, a deep policy analysis from the INSS, plus reporting from The Guardian and Responsible Statecraft.
Yeah, our mission is to unpack this unprecedented shift, explain the obscure 50-year-old legal tool they used to force the vote, and, explore what these cracking foundations mean for you and the future of American foreign policy.
But before we jump in, we want to make something very clear to you. The sources we're looking at today contain highly charged political content and really intense opinions from both the left and the right.
Right, and as your guides, we take absolutely no sides here. We aren't endorsing any of the viewpoints found in these documents.
Yeah, our goal is simply to report the facts impartially and help you understand the ideas contained in the original source material.
So we really just need to understand the how and the why behind the headlines.
Okay, so let's start with the specific weapons on the chopping block. To understand why this April 15th vote matters, we have to look at how the Senate treated two totally different pieces of military equipment. Sanders brought forward two major resolutions. The first one aimed to block a $151.8 million sale of 12,000 1,000-pound bombs, and the Senate defeated that measure by a vote of 36 to 63.
But then came the second resolution. This one aimed to block a $295 million sale of Caterpillar bulldozers, and that one failed by a vote of 40 to 59.
Yeah, and I noticed that gap immediately. 4 senators looked at the list, voted to approve sending 12,000 heavy explosive bombs, but then literally turned around and voted to block construction equipment. Like, why do bulldozers get 40 votes to block while bombs only get 36?
Well, it comes down to the psychology of the weapons and how they're actually used on the ground. When lawmakers look at 1,000-pound bombs, they mostly view them through the lens of, standard military operations.
Striking command centers, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Neutralizing tunnels, targeting military assets. They accept the traditional national defense framing. But a bulldozer tells a completely different story.
Different story how?
Well, we're talking about heavily armored Caterpillar D9 bulldozers. Activists and human rights groups have spent years heavily documenting how these specific machines are used for home demolitions and clearing infrastructure in places like Gaza and the West Bank.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they've effectively turned a piece of construction equipment into this potent symbol of civilian displacement.
Oh, right. And the sources mention a really emotional op-ed published right before the vote by Cindy Corey.
Yeah, that was a huge part of the context.
Because her daughter, Rachel Corey, was an American activist who was actually killed by an armored military bulldozer back in 2003 while she was trying to physically block a Palestinian home from being demolished.
Right. And when activists attach a tragic human story like that to a specific piece of hardware, it brings a massive amount of emotional weight to what is otherwise just, a dry list of military exploits.
Yeah, I totally see that. But I have to push back for a second here. If the resolution still failed by a 19-vote margin, why are analysts calling this a historic turning point?
Because the vote count itself is the victory for the progressives. Previously, Senator Sanders tried to block arms sales, and he only managed to gather 11 votes.
Wait, only 11?
Yeah, just 11. So jumping from 11 votes to 40 votes represents a fundamental shift in the Democratic Party.
It's like looking at a structural stress test on a bridge. The bridge didn't collapse today, but the inspectors just found out that 80% of the bolts just snapped.
That is a perfect analogy. And it's not just the usual progressive suspects voting no anymore. You have mainstream establishment figures flipping their previous positions.
Like California Senators Adam Schiff and Alex Padilla.
Exactly. Two very prominent traditional Democrats who voted to support the bloc. They released a joint statement basically saying that being a stalwart friend of Israel does not mean agreeing with all decisions of its government.
Which provides political cover for other moderate Democrats to follow suit.
Yes, it normalizes the idea of questioning military aid without inherently abandoning the alliance.
Okay, so now that we see the outcome, we need to understand the mechanism that made it happen. Because a 19-vote margin loss wouldn't be making international headlines if it happened quietly in some back committee room. How does a single senator force the entire Senate to vote on a foreign arms deal on live television?
The tool is just as fascinating as the outcome. It's inside the Arms Export Control Act, or AECA, and it's called a Joint Resolution of Disapproval, or a JRD.
Okay, I want to make sure I understand how this works, because the Congressional Research Service report outlines the history here. Basically, when the president wants to sell major weapons, the administration legally has to notify Congress.
Right, that's step one.
And if lawmakers object, they can pull this legislative brake pedal by passing a JRD to stop the weapons from shipping out.
Exactly, and the AECA gives these resolutions special fast-track status. Usually, congressional leadership holds a ton of power to just bury unpopular bills so the members don't have to make tough choices. But a JRD bypasses all that gatekeeping. It forces the issue directly onto the Senate floor.
But I read this staggering statistic in the CRS report. In 1986, Congress changed the rules, so a JRD actually requires the president's signature to take effect. And since 1986, Congress has never, literally not even once, successfully blocked an arms sale using a JRD.
Yeah, a 0% success rate over nearly 40 years.
Wait, the closest they ever got was in 1985 when the mere threat of a resolution caused President Reagan to delay a sale to Jordan.
Yeah.
So, pragmatically speaking, if this tool has a 100% failure rate in modern history and everyone knows the president would just veto it anyway, why do senators waste time using it?
Well, because it's a political weapon, not just a legal one. The true power of the JRD is that it forces every single senator to go on the record.
Oh, so it's like a political polygraph test.
Basically, yeah. You strap the entire Senate to the machine, and even if they know they won't, quote-unquote, go to jail because the president will just veto it, they still have to sweat under the bright lights and put their name on the public record.
Wow.
It creates a massive media spectacle. And it applies intense public pressure on the administration to change its behavior. Sanders knew he wouldn't get the 51 votes, but he proved that sometimes losing a vote is exactly how you change a policy conversation.
That makes total sense. And because the JRD forces everyone to go on the record, we can look exactly at who voted, which reveals this massive and growing partisan divide.
Oh, definitely. The Pew Research data on this is wild. 80% of Democrats now view Israel negatively. But on the flip side, only 13% of Republicans feel Israel's military response is excessive.
That is a stark split.
And the Senate roll call vote is a near-perfect mirror of that polling data. The Republicans operated with 100% unity. Not a single Republican senator voted to block the weapons.
But meanwhile, the Democrats are fracturing. And it's not just activists driving this. The sources point to a November 2025 State Department Office of Inspector General report.
Right, that internal report claimed there were hundreds of potential Leahy Law human rights violations.
Yeah, the Leahy Law. It's a crucial piece of this puzzle. It strictly forbids the federal government from funding foreign military units that commit gross violations of human rights.
Exactly.
But wait, I need to push back on this. If we have a federal law that forbids funding human rights violators and an official State Department report flags hundreds of potential violations, why didn't the vote pass? How does the law get enforced if the weapons just keep flowing?
Because the enforcement mechanism is incredibly slow and, frankly, highly politicized. The Inspector General report only flags potential violations. To actually stop the funding, the Secretary of State has to formally review the incidents and officially designate specific military units as violators.
Which they probably don't want to do with a close ally.
Exactly. The State Department has historically been very hesitant to make those formal designations. So progressives are using the JRD to say, if the State Department won't pull the brake pedal using the Leahy Law, we'll try to pull it ourselves using the Arms Export Control Act.
And the activist pressure is intense. Progressive groups protested directly outside the offices of Democratic leaders Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand, who both voted to keep sending weapons.
The pressure is pushing the boundaries of what's considered acceptable debate, for sure.
Yeah, like over in the House, progressives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ro Khanna are now even pushing to cut funding for the defensive Iron Dome system.
Which is a massive escalation in the political rhetoric.
Right, because it's a purely defensive system. It literally shoots incoming rockets out of the sky before they hit civilian neighborhoods. Suggesting Israel should buy their own interceptors crosses a red line that used to be completely untouchable. It's like this messy family feud playing out on the global stage for the Democrats, while the Republicans operate like a highly disciplined marching band.
Yeah, and the INSS report explains that this fracture extends far beyond the politicians. It's splitting the American Jewish community itself.
Oh, really? Because for decades, the pro-Israel lobby presented a remarkably united front.
They did. But now you have groups like J Street, which is a liberal Zionist group, actively supporting the arms limits. They even published a poll showing 61% of Jewish respondents supported a partial arms embargo until a ceasefire happens.
Which puts them in direct conflict with traditional establishment groups like AIPAC.
Exactly. And when a community fractures like that, it alters the political calculus for elected officials. They can break from the traditional consensus and point to groups like J Street as cover.
Let's transition from the current political drama to the big picture here, because I noticed the INSS report kept pointing to the year 2028 as this looming deadline.
Right, the 2028 U.S.-Israel Memorandum of Understanding.
The MOU, yeah. That dictates a 10-year military aid package. And if you're signing a 10-year deal, you have to survive at least 2, maybe 3 U.S. presidential elections.
That is the exact warning from the INSS report. Israel relies heavily on bipartisan support to secure that long-term aid.
And these votes get tangled up in larger global issues. Like on the exact same day, the Senate voted on a war powers resolution regarding Iran.
Yes, the timing there was not a coincidence at all. Senator Ed Markey explicitly told voters that blocking weapons to Israel was a way to prevent a wider war with Iran.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, though, some Democrats argued you can oppose an Iran war while still supplying bombs to Israel. Yeah. But it just shows how tangled the conflicts are.
So here's my forward-looking question. What happens to a strategic military alliance when it goes from being a guaranteed bipartisan handshake to a coin toss that depends entirely on which party wins the next U.S. election?
Well, the INSS report synthesizes this perfectly. If a foreign ally relies entirely on Republican support and totally alienates the Democratic Party, they lose their security safety net the moment political power shifts in Washington.
Wow. So it literally forces foreign nations to navigate domestic American politics just to secure their own defense.
Exactly. It introduces massive unpredictability into the global system.
So, to distill the core takeaways for you, the listener, the Senate vote numbers drastically shifted. A law with a 0% success rate was used brilliantly as a messaging tool. And the historically solid bipartisan consensus on military aid has fundamentally fractured.
It really is a totally new political landscape.
And we want to remind you why this matters directly to you. It is your taxpayer dollars funding these multi-billion-dollar sales. And the political shifts happening right now will dictate how the U.S. interacts with the rest of the world for the next decade.
The debate over your tax dollars is only going to get louder.
So we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to ponder. If a 50-year-old legal mechanism with a 0% success rate can expose this massive political earthquake today, what happens to the global order if the political math shifts just enough tomorrow that a joint resolution of disapproval actually passes?
Yeah. How would the world react if the U.S. Congress legally forced the president to cut off a major ally?
Something to think about.